Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel, and welcome back to this series where you're going to learn exactly how to build a website with Astro and also how to use it with TailwindCSS, React, and then also HeadlessUI. Now, in the previous video, I went over exactly how to create a website from scratch, how to scaffold your Astro website using the tools that they provide us. And we ended up with this result right here. So we have again here a blog, and we also have in here an index page, and then we have a single post right over here. Now, if you didn't watch this video, you can go to the channel, back to the previous video where I went over exactly how to do this. Now, in today's video, we'll go over how to create how to add interactivity into our website. Now, we'll add two different things into this website, and they're going to be, first of all, adding in here a drop down when we click on blog, so we can select multiple blog categories. And then we're also going to go ahead and create a contact us page where we can go ahead and submit a form, but with front end validation. So instead of it having to go to a server, validate, and then the page having to refresh, we can actually create all of that validation inside of our client. Now, with that in mind, let's start by creating here our blog dropdown. And the first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and navigate here to your header component, header.astro component. And then we're going to go ahead and create a new file here inside of the components folder that we'll call, let's say, header blog item. And then we want to go ahead and make sure that this is .tsx. Now, before I forget, let's actually go ahead and first of all install React, because I got ahead of myself and I actually went ahead and created this file. But let's go ahead and first of all install React. Now again, one of the cool things about Astro is that it provides us with a lot of tools that we can use in order to install commonly used tools in order to build our websites more easily. Now, in the previous video, and again, if you didn't watch it, I really recommend you to go ahead and watch the previous video so you understand everything that we're doing here. We installed TailwindCSS, and in order to install TailwindCSS, we had to simply run one command. And in the case of React, it also is only one command, and we get everything installed that we need in order to use it. Now let's go ahead and type in here Astro docs. And let's go ahead and navigate here to its documentation. Now we want to go ahead and search here for React, and as you can see, one of the integrations that they provide us is the Astro JS React package. And as you can see, it essentially allows us to add React to our project instead of having to manually install it and configure it. So let's go ahead and move here to the terminal window where our server is running, and let's go ahead and paste this command in here. Now, if you're using npm, you want to use this, and if you're using yarn, you want to use that command. So let's go ahead and add this to our project. And now, similarly to the case with TailwindCSS, as you can see, it is asking us if we want to install these packages, and since we haven't installed them yet, we want to go ahead and install those dependencies. And then it is going to ask us if you want to import here React from Astro.js React and then add it to our integrations array. So we're also going to go ahead and confirm that. Now, if you didn't go over the previous video, if you have a project from scratch, let's say, this would go ahead and add here a new key and then add React, but because we have TailwindCSS already configured, this is simply going to append it again to the array. Now let's go ahead and do one more thing, which is to add our types. So since we're using TypeScript, we want to be able, so as you can see here, we have TSX, which means that we are using JSX with TypeScript. And if we go ahead and see here our package.json, you'll be able to see that Astro went ahead and installed React and also React DOM. But the thing we don't have yet is our type. So let's go ahead and install the types for React and also for React DOM. Now you want to make sure that you save this as dev. If you're using yarn, you can go ahead and do this, yarn add that and then the d flag. And with npm you can do the exact same thing like this, and then you can go ahead and install here the types again for React and for the React DOM packages. Alright, so with this in mind, we can now go ahead and restart here our server, and let's go ahead and see if all of this is working. So let's go ahead and export here this component, and then let's go ahead and just to see if this is working, return header blog item like that. Alright, so it says here that we cannot use JSX unless JSX flag is provided, so we probably need to go ahead and come here to so let's go ahead and search here TypeScript and then JSX config file, because we are probably missing some type of flag here in not really a flag, so we are missing some kind of configuration here inside of our TS config file. So let's take a look here, and we essentially want to enable, so we want to tell TypeScript that this project has JSX enabled. So I'm not really sure just what the where this configuration key should go, so let me just take a look here. Alright, so let's see here, TS config file, or JSX actually. Alright, and now let's just take a look here, TS config file. Alright, so we essentially want to add it. Okay, so we want to go ahead and add in here compiler options, and then we want to go ahead and add in here, just like we saw here, JSX, and then we want to use React JSX. Alright, now let's go ahead and try to restart here our LSP, and this should probably not complain anymore, and that's exactly right. So now as you can see, this is not complaining anymore, and just to make sure that this is the thing that was actually creating the problem, let's go ahead now and restart here our LSP. And as you can see, this is complaining, so yeah, so this is exactly what was causing this issue to appear. So again, make sure that you install not only here the React package according to this documentation, but that you also then again go ahead and add here the types for React DOM, and then add this configuration here, because the Astro TS configs strict configuration, so we are extending this configuration. This does not include here React JSX. So with that in mind, let's go ahead now and import this component here into Astro. And again, the cool thing about Astro is that we are able to import React components into it without having to do any additional setup. So we want to replace here the blog item, so let's go ahead and delete it, and then as you can see here, we have it already automatically able to import it. So we went ahead and imported this, and let's see if we can go to the file, and as you can see, if we go to the definition, it comes here to this file. So now if we navigate here instead of having the blog item that we had, we now have header blog item. Now the next step is for us to go ahead and actually set up our component here with the drop down functionality. So let's go ahead and first of all copy here from our header these styles. So we want to go ahead and copy everything that's inside this, and then we're going to go ahead and change here the class name, and let's change this to a button. And now let's go ahead and change this to blog. Alright, so the thing that we're going to be using in order to install, essentially not install, the thing that we're going to be using in order to be able to create a drop down, so a pop over, is HeadlessUI. Now, one of the cool things again about using Astro with React, or even if you want with Svelte or Vue, is that we can go ahead and use all of these components that are already created for us, all of these cool libraries inside of React, while still keeping our website very fast and static. So we only add again the functionality that we need, the interactivity that we need, without having to sacrifice speed with our website. Let's go ahead and search here for HeadlessUI, and we want to grab here the React one, and then we want to search here for the popover. Now here, as you can see, we first need to start by installing this. So let's go ahead and do a pm install, then paste this in here. So again, if you're using Yarn, you want to type yarn add. In this case, it is pm install. Now let's also go ahead and restart the server. And now, as you can see, we have here a very basic example. So we'll simply go ahead and copy this in here. And then we want to go ahead and paste this. So let's go ahead and do this. All right. And then we actually want to go ahead and add this in here and replace this with the popover button. So now let's go ahead and take a look here on our website how this is looking. And as you can see, if you go ahead and click here on blog, nothing happens at all. And that's because by default Astro doesn't enable any kind of interactivity. So if we go ahead and inspect this and we click here, nothing happened. And that's because if we take a look here at the Astro directives, I think that's the name, or just directives. Okay, so here, client directives. As you can see, we have multiple directives. So in this case, five different directives that we can go ahead and use in order to load JavaScript into our website. Now we have, first of all, here client load, which is of priority high. Then we have client idle, which is of priority medium. And finally, client visible, which is of priority low. Now we want to go ahead and use this client visible because as you can see, we have here heavy image carousel, show hide button, and buy button. So as you can see, this is because this is essentially a drop-down menu that is only going to be displayed after the page loads. It is really not that important, so we can go ahead and use this directive. So let's go ahead and move here to our header component. And then here we want to do the following. We want to add again client visible. So this is the exact same one that we went ahead and copied. And now if we go ahead and we restart here, as you can see, we have here our blog, and if you click, this now drops down. Now let's go ahead and fix here this bug that we have right over here. And as you can see, because we added here our space x 3.5, this is going to try and go ahead and space all of these items by using margins, but because this component is using here an Astro island, this is not actually able to go ahead and separate this. So let's first of all give it a try like this. So let's see if this works. And that's exactly right. So now if we add a div around it, this now spaces it correctly, and we can now go ahead and use this dropdown. So now let's go ahead and see exactly why this looks the way it looks. And that's probably because we have two different columns in here. So let's go ahead and delete these columns. And now this looks like this. So let's go ahead and give some sort of style to this menu now. So we want to go ahead and flex this and then add a flex call. So this now looks like this. And then we want to go ahead, add a border. Let's add border gray, let's say 200, some type of shadow. Let's say a medium shadow, for example. Or actually a small one looks a bit better. And then let's go ahead, also add some type of padding. And then finally we want to add here rounded large. Now this looks like this. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to add here a bit of margin when it comes here. So we want it to be a bit separated here from the blog. and then we also want to go ahead and center it. Now let's give it a try like this. So if we add in here, let's say top 2, so this doesn't work like that, so let's give it a try here. And now as you can see, we have a bit of margin, so now this looks better. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and center this. So let's go ahead and give this left and then half, so we want essentially this to be left 50%, and then minus translate x, and then also half. So this is essentially going to do a translate x of minus 50%, and the result that we get is the following. So we now have, as you can see here, a pop over that we can simply go ahead, click here, and then we can navigate, and if we lose focus, it automatically goes ahead and closes it. Now let's go ahead and change all of this. Let's say that we want category, or even actually instead of that blog, and let's say bikes, that you want to have something about bikes or skateboards, or even surf, or maybe even soccer. Now let's also go ahead and change this. So in here surf, and finally soccer. Let's also go ahead and delete this image because we actually don't need this. And now as you can see, our blog drop down is complete. So now we have in here our nice website, and as you can see, we have in here a blog component that is able to have a drop down. Now if we take a look again here, as you can see, what's happening in here is that Astro is essentially going to go ahead and use here just one particular component. So we have in here this file, and then it is going to run a script that is going to be customized based on our directive. Now because we went ahead and added in here visible, it is going to run a particular type of script. So as you can see here, we'll load here before hydration and all of the scripts that it needs in order to go ahead and run. And then we also, in this case, we don't have any kind of props. If we had any type of props, they would show up in here inside of this object, inside of the string. As you can see here, props. So again, this is going to work as an island. So also we have in here all of this code that is going to take care of essentially running this script at the correct time. And with that in mind, we now have here, as you can see again, a drop-down menu that works perfectly and that we can use in order to allow essentially interactivity into our website while keeping our website static. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create here a contact us page. Now first of all, as you can see, we still don't have here our contact us page available, so let's go ahead and do exactly that. So we simply need to go ahead, navigate here to pages, and then create a contact us page, and then .astro. So now if we add in here contact us, just to make sure this works, now if we go ahead and refresh, as you can see, this text displays here. Now we want to go ahead and use React in order to essentially create a form to handle all of the form changes, and then also be able to create some type of validation. Now in order to do that, we'll use here React hook form, which is a library, as you can see, that is going to allow us to create simple React forms with validation. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the get started. And then let's start by first of all installing it. So we want to go ahead and again do a npm install, npm install or yarn add. And then let's go ahead and restart here our server. And then let's go ahead, move back here. And now let's go ahead and start by first of all creating the layout of our page. So we want to start by first of all adding here first the layout. So it is our basically our base layout. Then let's go ahead and add a title, which is going to be contact us. And as you can see, contact us is the title of this page. We also have here our header and our footer. Again, all of this still works. And now we want to go ahead and create here a div that we're going to, again, similar to the previous cases, we want to go ahead and add here, let's say, go ahead and do MX auto, so this centers, and then max width screen, and then a large. Let's also go ahead and add some type of content here. So maybe instead of a large, let's do actually a medium. So now we have our content in there, and also margin at the top of 24. Now let's start by first of all adding in here our form title. And because we still don't have any kind of interactivity, as you can see, we are still only using here Astro and not actually going ahead and grabbing React because we don't yet need it. So let's go ahead and do here contact us. And actually, let's go ahead and copy this here from our index. And then let's go ahead and change this to contact us. And also let's go ahead and grab here this tag, and then let's keep it like that. So we have in here a lorem ipsum. It doesn't really matter what it says for now. So we have now here our contact us page. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to actually now go ahead and create our contact us form.tsx, and in here we'll actually have all of our contact forms and all of that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and export this component. We'll return for now in here a div that simply says contact us form, so we can make sure this is working. And then let's go ahead and import this. So for now this is not showing. Let's just ensure all of this is saved. So now contact us form, and let's try to import it manually. So let's just check contact us form, and in here same thing. So you need to import it like this from components and then contact us form, and now in here we import it like this. So we need to deconstruct it because this is the constant that is being exported and not as default, so we need to do it like this. So now as you can see, we have in here our contact us form, and let's go ahead. So this had here some kind of error, so contact us form is not defined, so the development server shut down automatically. So let's go ahead and restart it, and now as you can see we have here, so this is already our React component. Now for now this is not interactive, so let's go ahead and do the exact same thing. So client visible, and now let's go ahead and create all of our form fields. Now the first thing we want to do is we actually, for us to have an easier time styling these forms, we want to go ahead and grab the following tool. So let's go ahead and search here for TailwindCSS forms. And then as you can see it says here, so this is created again by the same people that created Tailwind. And as you can see, it is a plugin that provides basic reset form styles that makes form elements easy to override with utilities. So let's go ahead and install this again as a development dependency. So npm or pnpm install, then save dev, and then Tailwind CSS forms. And then in order to make sure that this works, so we want to activate this plugin. So let's go ahead and require it in here. So Tailwind CSS forms. So now if we take a look here, as you can see, this is exactly what we did. So we essentially want to require it here inside of the plugins array inside of the Tailwind config.js file. So now with that in mind, let's go ahead and restart here our server. And now we can go ahead and create our form. So let's go ahead and move here back to our React hook form documentation. And in here, we're going to take a look here. So most of this stuff we're actually not going to need. The only thing that we'll need here is to use the use form hook. And then we'll need here the register and the handle submit methods that it provides us. And then what actually goes ahead and happens here is that we're going to go ahead and use this register method, as you can see that we have here. And then we create an input. So this is the same as you would do in HTML. And then we simply need to deconstruct here this register method, and then we need to go ahead and call it, and then we're going to go ahead and call it with a string that is going to be the value of the form. So this is going to be essentially the key that we want this input to have. So in this case it is example. If we had something like email, we would pass in here the email or name or so forth and so forth. So we essentially want to pass in here the key of this field. So let's go ahead and do this inside of our form component. So again, we want to start by first of all using here form. So let's go ahead and import it from, again, React hook form. And then we want to use the register method and also handle submit. Now, again, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that all of this stuff that we're going to go ahead and do are inside of a form tag. So for this to work, we're actually going to go ahead and call here the submit, the handle submit inside of on submit. So because of that, we need to actually create here a form tag. And then in here, let's go ahead and add an input of type text. And then let's go ahead and register. And let's say that we want the email of someone. And actually, instead of being here text, let's do email. All right, so now let's go ahead and create here on submit. And then we'll pass in here our values, and then we'll have access here to the values. Now, because we are using TypeScript, we want to ensure that this is typed. So let's go ahead and do the following. So type values equals, let's go ahead and do email, which is a string. And then let's also go ahead and add, let's say, a name, which we'll add in just a second to our form. Let's go ahead and replace this. Not replace, actually, let's go ahead and add this here. And now what this means is that the form values are going to be email, which is type string, and then name, which is type string. So as you can see, if we remove here, we are able, as you can see, to pass in here our field values. So that's exactly what we're doing. And now if we go ahead and delete this, now if we open here our strings, as you can see, TypeScript automatically goes ahead and infers that we can either have an email or a name. And if we try to go ahead and do something like this, argument of type name is not assignable to parameter of type email or name. So let's go ahead and do email in here again. And then let's go ahead and do in here, this one is text, and then name. Now the values are of type values. And now we can go ahead and console log our values to make sure that all of this is working. And finally, like we saw here, so again, we want to essentially have this thing right over here. So the handle submit is the function that we grab, the method that we grab from here, so from use form. And then on submit is the method that the function that we created here. And then this is the usual on submit that is always available inside of React with JavaScript. So essentially we want to use here on submit, and then React is going to pass all of this stuff in here, and then we have access to it. So let's go ahead and do here on submit. So again, as you can see, DOM attribute on submit, and then we're going to go ahead and call on submit and then pass into it our on submit function. And now let's go ahead and take a look here at our website. And now as you can see, we have two different forms. And now let's also go ahead and add in here a button that is going to be submit form. And also let's go ahead and also ensure that this is type submit. So if we add in here type button, this wouldn't go ahead and submit it, but if we keep it that way, type submit, we can go ahead and submit our form. Now let's go ahead and take here a look here at our console. And if we do here an email and then a name, And if we submit the form, as you can see, we now have access here to our email and our name. And again, the cool thing about this is that, similarly to the case here with our blog, this is all inside of an Astro island, which means that the entire site is going to be loading. So let's just take a look at it like this. So we have the entire site that is loading, and then we have only this part that is going to be loaded. So when after all of the HTML is loaded, and after all of the stuff that the browser needs to do, this is left to the end. And then we also go ahead and do the exact same thing here for the blog. And again, because we are using the visible directive, this is sort of being rendered after the fact. So this doesn't have really a high priority like we saw. This has a low priority, and that's because this is a form. This doesn't have to be rendered as soon as the page is loaded. So with that in mind, let's go ahead now and do the following. We now want to go ahead and style both of these inputs using TailwindCSS. So let's start by first of all creating in here a new class, and let's add in here border. Then let's make this one gray. Also, we want it to be rounded large. All right. Now let's also go ahead and make sure that this is a bit smaller than it is right now. So let's say that we want width, let's say 200, or let's say 396 pixels, for example. Now let's go ahead and center this, and actually this can be a bit larger. Let's say 96 times 4 times 5 times 6. Let's go ahead and give it here 576 pixels. And actually we could probably leave it here at the left. And now let's also go ahead and add a bit of margin, probably only 4. It looks good enough. Now let's go ahead and add here some padding. So we can do it like this, 5 and 4. And let's also go ahead and increase here the border. So now, as you can see, we have here both of our inputs, and we want to first of all make sure that this is of width full and it is a block. So now it stretches to the size of these things minus here the padding. And then we want to add a couple of things. Let's also go ahead and add a placeholder in here, and let's say that the placeholder could be example@gmail.com. So now we have in here a placeholder, and now let's go ahead and style this a bit more. So we want to actually go here. So the border is going to be gray 100, then we'll have rounded large. All right, then let's go ahead and add a line around our input each time that we focus on it. So let's go ahead and add in here focus and then ring 2. Now, if you're not familiar, let's just take a look here. TailwindCSS ring. So what this essentially means is that we want to essentially using, as you can see here, box shadow. So using shadow variables inside of CSS, we'll simply add a ring around our either a button or an input in this case. So let's go ahead and again make this one 2, and then when it focuses also we want the ring to have a color of blue 300. So now, as you can see, this looks like this, and it looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and copy this class name, paste this in here, and finally let's also go ahead and add in here a placeholder for this one. So let's say that we want this to be John Doe, like this. And now if we take a look here at our form, as you can see, we have 2 different inputs. Now let's also go ahead and add here a margin to the top. So this has a bit of space between both of the inputs. And finally, let's go ahead and style here our button. So we want to first of all add here, let's say background blue 600. Let's ensure that the text is white. Let's also add a bit of padding to this button. Let's also make sure that this is spaced from our input, maybe even a 3.5. And then let's also, to keep it consistent with the rest of the styles, add in here a border that's large, border radius. And then actually let's go ahead and increase a bit here this border on both of these form inputs. And now we want to, each time that we hover over it, the background is going to change. So we want it to be blue, as you can see. And now once it is active, so once we click on it, we also want to add a ring similarly to this case, but we want it to be a bit bigger. And let's also give it a try with, let's say, a 500 maybe in this case, probably a bit less. So as you can see, each time that we click now on the submit form, we have a ring around it. And to keep it also consistent, let's go ahead and also do all of this once it is focused. Let's just go ahead and copy this entire part of our code, and then let's go ahead and replace all of this with focus, and then also with focus. So now each time that we also go ahead and do this, as you can see, we now click here and we have this working. And finally, as you can see, each time that we also go ahead and go over it with our tab key, so it sort of has a bit of a strange feeling to it. So let's go ahead, and we probably need to go ahead and each time that is focused, we want to go ahead and do outline none. And now as you can see, this now looks good. So we have in here our form completely styled and it looks pretty nice. And again, if we go ahead and inspect here inside of our console, as you can see, if we go ahead and do this and we submit our form, as you can see, we get here our data still. So all of this is still working and the form looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and do the last thing that we need, which is to add some type of validation. So let's go ahead and, just so you understand, take a look here at schema validation. Now, the way that React hook form works is that instead of it having a sort of a way for us to validate our input on the client, it provides us with hooks into different kind of packages that provide this type of validation. So one that is pretty popular is Yup, and it is the one that we're going to be using for this example. So as you can see, we simply need to pass in here on the use form hook our resolver, then we need to pass here the Yup resolver that we import here from hook form resolvers, and finally we need to pass in here a schema that is going to be of type yup.object. Now as you can see, it is imported from Yup instead of being imported directly from React hook form. Now this type of separation is really cool, and it allows us to use different type of packages in order to validate our inputs, but in this case we're going to stick with Yup, and we're going to be using it again to validate our email and our name. So to install it, we simply need to go ahead and copy this, so hook form /resolvers and then the Yup package. So let's go ahead and stop here our server, and let's go ahead and install both of these packages. And now after they are installed, let's go ahead and restart our server. And now if we go here, we simply need to go ahead, let's first of all define our schema. So that's the first thing that we want to go ahead and do. And again, we need to use Yup, and we'll import it like this. So we want to import and then asterisk as Yup from Yup, and then we want to go ahead and simply pass in here object, so that object, and in here we're going to go ahead and pass an object. We have an email, which is yup.string.email.required, and then we'll simply go ahead and copy this and simply remove here the email part. So this is going to be simply a string, and this is going to be a string, but it has to be of type email. So this is going to have some type of validation that is going to be internally done by Yup, and then it is going to pass that data to React hook form, so we know exactly how if this form is exactly with the structure that we want it to be. So again, we want to pass in here our resolver, and we want to import here our resolver from @hook form resolvers, and then yep, and then we want to import here our yep resolver, and then let's go ahead and add this in here to the resolver again key, and then we want to pass in here our schema. So now we have this validation here, and the last thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and use here our errors inside of our form state that we have available in here. So we're deconstructing this because we don't want to use everything here from the form state, so we only want to use the errors. So that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and do. And now, as you can see, we can simply pass in here this thing like this. So we first of all need to verify if the error that we want is available, and then we pass a message. So let's go ahead and instead of rewriting this, let's simply write in here for example, error message, and then we want this to return a div, or yeah, it can be actually a div, that's fine. And then we want to add in here error message. Let's just keep it for now like this. And now we want to have this error message here and also down here. Now let's go ahead and add a bit of margin to this, so it matches the margin here, or maybe even 1.5. And then we want the text to be red and then 600. So let's just give it a try, see how this looks. So as you can see, we have here an error message, and we can maybe even make it a bit smaller and keep it only at the margin top of 1. Alright, so now let's go ahead and update this message here. So we want, instead of having this message, we want to have children passed in here that we're going to be passing from our component up here. And in order to do that, let's simply go ahead, pass in here children. Let's also go ahead and add in here error message props, and this is going to be a type, so error message props, and then in here we'll have children, which is going to be undefined or React node. So now this essentially means that we're going to go ahead and pass in here our children. This has a type, so this object has a type, and inside of that object we have a key of children that is going to be either undefined or React node, and then we access it in here. So now let's go ahead and first of all check if there are errors with our email. Then we want to go ahead and pass this in here, and we want to pass in here errors.email. And now this says that the type field error is not assignable to React node. So let's go ahead and try to update this one. As you can see, this is still complaining, and that's because we might actually want to do something a bit different. So instead of doing this, let's simply go ahead and delete all of that part. And then in here, instead of being children, let's add error. Let's also go ahead and update this here. And now let's say in here error.message. Alright, so now this looks correct. And now we simply want to go ahead and in here pass our error, which is going to be errors.email in this case. So now we can also go ahead, copy this, and again simply replace this with our name. So now if we go ahead and try to submit, as you can see, email is a required field and name is also a required field, which is great news because we now have validation working on the client. And again, we also have here our drop down created, so we can go ahead and navigate to our website from this drop down that is again going to be hydrated partially on our browser. So we again essentially have islands that are going to be hydrated instead of having our entire website having to be entirely hydrated. even the parts that are static and don't update at all, which is a big improvement over tools like, let's say, Next.js, which does this. It essentially goes ahead and it hydrates the entire page as one application instead of having multiple islands being hydrated by themselves only when we need them to actually be hydrated and be interactive. Now let's go ahead and modify this message because this still looks a bit weird. So let's go ahead and say in here, as you can see, email is a required field. So we simply need to pass in here email address is required. And actually, let's go ahead and keep it like this. All right. So now, as you can see, each time that we change here inside of this required method, it is going to be changing the message that we see here. Let's also go ahead and add a dot at the end. And now we want to go ahead and do this exact same thing, but here for the name. Name is required. Now, if we also go ahead, so as you can see now, if we type it in here, it goes away. So it means that this knows that something was typed and the validation is done again. And it knows that there are no errors anymore. And also just to check, as you can see, if we try to go ahead and submit, it doesn't submit because it doesn't allow us. So all of this data still doesn't go here through this onSubmit function, which means that it only gets here. Our code inside of this function only runs if all of this is correct. So with that in mind, now let's go ahead and do one last thing. Let's also go ahead and delete this part. And the last thing we want to do is to see exactly what the behavior is. Once we start typing, as you can see, email must be a valid email. So let's go ahead and also change this message in here and say email address is not valid. So this is a bit more clear. And now again, if we go ahead and press submit, the first thing we're going to see is the email address is required, and that's because at the moment we still don't have anything. And if we start typing, it changes to email address is not valid because it redoes the validation, and this at the moment is not a valid email. But if we go ahead and do this, now we have a valid email in here. And now if we type something here and we go ahead and submit, as you can see, we now have client-side validation inside of our Astro static website. Alright, so this is everything that we need to do for this video. So again, we went over how to add interactivity using React into our Astro website. So again, if you didn't watch the previous video, you can go ahead and watch it so you can see everything that we did in order to set up from scratch an Astro website. And in the next video, we'll go over exactly how to deploy this website to a Linux server. So if you're using something like Linode, DigitalOcean, or even Amazon AWS, you'll learn exactly step by step how you can deploy very easily your Astro website in just a couple of minutes, so you can have it live and with all of this interactivity working, and you can then again have your website live. So finally, leave a like below, let me know in the comments what you think about this series. Again, more stuff that you want to see from Astro, stuff about Astro, even other stuff about web development, and also subscribe to get notified of future content.